When a hawking single mom suddenly disappears, nothing seems to make sense.
Her purse and keys are in the front seat.
Looking further in the car, there was a big pool of blood there.
I kept thinking, she's unconscious. She's at a hospital.
And the only witness might be too young to reveal the truth.
I saw a little girl holding a pillow.
There's no way she would leave her daughter.
What is really going on?
Yes.
The investigation will uncover a mountain of secrets and lies.
Girl, are you sitting down?
Not only did he lie about his marriage, but he lied about where he lived.
You got some explaining to do. It's just not sitting right. We need to talk.
But some people will stop at nothing to keep up their facade.
There's nothing hidden anymore.
There's no Prince Charming. That's a fairy tale.
June 9th, 2016. It's Thursday morning in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the state's capital and second most populous city.
Compared to New Orleans, it's much more straight-laced and conservative.
It's more of a settling down community. It's a great place to raise a family.
There are a lot of hard-working 9-to-5 kind of people.
But as medical transport driver Leslie Parms is on his way to work that morning, something stops him in his tracks.
On my way in to the office, I saw a little girl standing by the street holding a pillow.
She seemed distressed, confused, and traumatized.
Concerned, Leslie gets out of his van to check on the little girl.
She was just kind of discombobulated.
Somebody with you?
When she doesn't respond, he decides to call 911.
I didn't feel comfortable leaving such a small young child there by themselves.
I don't see nobody.
With dispatch on the line, Leslie continues to ask the little girl questions.
Where was her mom? Where's her dad? Where does she live?
Do you know where your mommy's car is?
At that point, she points to a car parked across the parking lot from where she's standing.
Can we go there? All right, we're gonna take her to the car.
At the car, Leslie gives the dispatcher the plate number.
Yeah, it's a Louisiana tag, B8-99380.
They identify the car as belonging to Lintel, Washington.
But there's no sight of her anywhere.
You stay right here.
Then, as Leslie steps closer, he makes a shocking discovery.
There was a big pool of blood. Something bad had happened.
Yeah, you better get a police car here quick.
Single mother Lintel Washington had a strong passion for teaching.
She was always a teacher. She had made that decision because she just wanted to touch kids' lives.
Teaching was her heart. She was so good at what she did.
She was actually voted Teacher of the Year in 2014 to 2015.
You don't get that award by being a killjoy. You're someone that people enjoy being around.
While her career was an unqualified success, her personal life had always been a struggle.
Originally from New Orleans, she married very young.
This was a way for her to get out of her strict household, her strict upbringing.
But unfortunately, no sooner than she got married, about 3 weeks later, she was already getting divorced.
After that, she met another man named Darren Schaefer at a barbecue.
It was just like kismet. Immediate connection. They got to know each other, started dating.
Things seemed good, and after about a year, Lintel was pregnant.
She had suffered from fibroids, and the doctor had told her for years that she couldn't be a mother. So she was really elated, very excited, because she always wanted to be a mom.
But by the time their daughter was born, her relationship with Darren had ended.
He had his own demons that he was fighting, and so she became a single mom.
Although Lintel was a bit heartbroken, she bounced back.
She moved to Baton Rouge looking for a fresh start.
The fresh start also came with a new job doing what she loved.
One day she calls, she's excited. She's like, hey, I have the job.
And it was there that she met Dr. Robert Marks.
Robert had a PhD and was one of the school's assistant principals.
Hey,
Hi,
how's the new job going?
it's going great.
She tells me, she says, girl, homeboy was watching me like he saw God.
Well, you know, we're lucky to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
It was clear that Dr. Marks had his eye on Lintel.
He continued to approach her. He continues to be thoughtful, continue to be nice.
For Lintel, he checked all the boxes.
Lintel was thrilled because Robert was successful. He had a PhD.
He's whining and dining her. He's spending time with her and her daughter.
They are spending the night at Lintel's house. They are taking trips together.
He just was giving her this exhilarating feeling and some excitement in her life.
They also started talking about a future together.
And at the end of 2015, Lintel was pregnant again with her second child.
There's a phone call that comes and she's pregnant. I asked her, what did he say? She says, girl, he is so happy.
He wants her to have this child, and that makes her even more happy that things are going to move in that direction of marriage.
Yeah, I got a little girl here.
But now, a good Samaritan has just found Lintel's little girl wandering alone near her mother's abandoned car and called 911.
He's telling them it appears someone has been really harmed.
There was just too much blood for somebody just to have an accident or a fight.
I'll get something to assist. Found a 3-year-old in the parking lot. Child was wearing a pink shirt. 15, I'll be around.
When an officer arrives on the scene, he confirms the car is Lintel's.
Lintel's purse and keys are in the front seat.
So this is just not a abandonment of a child, it seems. What is really going on?
But when they try to ask Lintel's daughter what happened, what they get is hard to follow.
They ask her, well, where is mommy?
Do you know where your mommy is?
Mommy's asleep in the lake.
Single mother and beloved teacher Lintel Washington had finally found the man of her dreams in Dr. Robert Marks.
He's the assistant principal of her school and the father of her unborn child.
She's just so happy that she found someone of his caliber, his education.
She was smitten by him. He's her Mr. Right.
But now police have been dispatched to a parking lot where Lintel's daughter was found wandering alone.
Lintel's car is nearby. Her purse and keys are in the front seat, and there is a considerable amount of blood in the back seat.
Based on the amount of blood, it appears that something terrible has happened to Lintel.
The car looked like a murder scene.
However, there are no weapons or shell cases or anything pointing to what may have caused the injury.
There's also no blood spatter consistent with a stabbing or a shooting.
It's just blood pooled.
This tells police that whatever happened to Lintel, it didn't happen in that car. It likely happened before she got to the car.
The other piece of evidence that they found was this one sandal in the car.
So exactly what happened and how her car ended up in the parking lot is unclear.
Was this a kidnapping? Was this a murder?
But the officer suspects Lintel's daughter might have witnessed whatever happened to her mother.
There's blood on her foot.
And the little girl appears traumatized by the ordeal.
Emotionally clutching a pillow, that's a sign for I need security, I'm scared.
Figuring she needs time to recover from the shock, police call for a special victims unit.
They assist the police in securing this young lady and getting her into a safe place.
I need homicide and SVU to my location.
In the meantime, detectives arrive and quickly begin their investigation.
Detectives find a surveillance camera on a nearby building, and they ask to see the footage.
Possible if we can get the footage of that?
Management immediately sends them the footage from that morning, and it shows Lintel's daughter wandering aimlessly around the parking lot.
It was just the way Leslie Parms said he found her.
Scrolling back, detectives find Lintel's car pulling into the parking lot about 11:30 p.m., but it's too dark to tell who's behind the wheel.
It's also not clear how many people are actually in the car.
So they're a little bit stuck because there are not clues about where Lintel is, what happened to her.
The only thing they know for sure is that Lintel's little girl spent the night in the parking lot.
That's a long time, so thank goodness she was safe, given the circumstances.
Next, detectives contact the school where Lintel works.
They learned she didn't show up for work that morning. She also didn't call in.
That was very unusual for Lintel because she had a pretty good track record of showing up, being reliable.
One of Lintel's co-workers, named Janet Foster, ends up speaking with investigators.
This was her supervisor turned friend.
And when she finds out that her daughter had been wandering around aimlessly, she is adamant that there's no way Lintel would leave her daughter alone at all.
She was always a very attentive mother.
Okay, could you come down here and speak with us?
I'm on my way now.
She immediately stops what she's doing and goes directly to that scene.
On the way, she also reaches out to Lintel's emergency contact, her best friend, Melissa.
She starts to explain that she didn't know where she was, and she says they found her car. And so she's in Baton Rouge, I'm in New Orleans. And I'm like, well, what else? She said, well, they found her daughter wandering around in the parking lot.
Melissa agrees with Janet.
Lintel would never leave her daughter in that type of situation, so we knew something was wrong.
When Janet arrives, she's shocked by the scene.
She was not expecting to see what she saw, which was a lot of yellow tape.
And as she approached, she was told it's a crime scene.
When she explains she works with Lintel, she's immediately connected with detectives.
She said she wants to help in any way she can.
How well did you know Lintel?
We were close, real close.
She also reveals to police that there's an assistant principal that works there by the name of Robert Marks. And Robert Marks was in a relationship with Lintel.
Not only is Lintel dating the assistant principal, Robert Marks, she's also about 7.5 months pregnant with this child.
There's just one small problem.
Dr. Robert Marks is married, but not to Lintel.
Investigating the strange disappearance of Lintel Washington have learned that the 40-year-old teacher is dating a married man and is pregnant with his child.
From the beginning, she was like, hold on, aren't you married? Why are you pursuing me?
Wait, you coming on a little strong for a married man, ain't you?
It's not what you think.
But he tells her that I'm going through a divorce and my marriage been over. Like he was just there.
Now, Dr. Marks is successful. He says this is a big house, so they are able to have their separate areas.
In this 2-story house, she's upstairs, he's downstairs.
He says they didn't sleep together, but they are going through the motions because they have 2 children.
And that's when Lintel's hesitation started to fade away.
Dr. Mark's perspective is he wants a clean divorce. He doesn't want to hurt the children and even his wife any more than they have to.
He didn't want the relationship to come out too soon.
So he asked her, can we kind of keep this quiet? Because he didn't want the soon-to-be ex-wife to use this in a courtroom.
It was already somewhat of an inappropriate relationship because it was a workplace relationship. So there's probably some complexities to the relationship because of that.
Janet tells detectives that once the divorce was finalized, the plan was to go public with their relationship.
She trusted what Dr. Mark said, and she continued on with the relationship with the understanding that she's not a homewrecker. The marriage is over.
In her mind, it made sense. And he truly wanted to be in this relationship with Lintel.
And what gave Dr. Mark some veracity to his claims that he was truly getting divorced is all the times they have spent with one another.
When she calls, he's answering. He's at the house. He's spending the night. He's not moving like a married man.
Lintel is thinking, my heart trusts this because 9 times out of 10, he's here with me.
Then she got pregnant.
Soon, the couple was starting to plan their future together.
He wanted to adopt her daughter. They were actually looking for apartments. She was in a 1-bedroom, and she calls and she tells me that they went to go look at the 2-bedroom.
He loved her. They were going to be a family.
But then, Janet says that things suddenly changed.
At the beginning of June, Robert suddenly stops answering her calls.
I spoke with her Saturday. She's upset because she hadn't heard from him since Thursday.
Lintel was just beginning to start to teach summer school, and she was curious as to where he was.
So, Janet says that Lintel came to her.
She wanted to know if Janet knew where Robert might be.
She asked me if he took off work.
And Hattie?
Yeah, for a family reunion.
Still, there's no reason he can't send a text message to say, hey, I'm busy, I'll call you later.
Something in her gut was like, hold on, something's not right. You're going to a family reunion and you have ghosted me. You're not responding to me. I have your child.
That's when Lintel started to look up Robert on social media, and she discovers his wife's Facebook page.
She says something that knocks her socks off.
Hey. Girl, are you sitting down? You have to see this.
She tells me to type in his wife's name. And when I type it in, I see what she saw. And I saw Robert Marks and his wife. She's standing next to him.
She sees her man and Angela Marks very much in love.
Now you tell me, does this look like a couple that's getting a divorce to you?
No.
And to make matters worse, it doesn't look much like a family reunion. They're on a cruise together.
If a picture can have 1,000 words, it says, married is married, he is not going anywhere.
Janet says Lintel was devastated.
She's crying, she's upset, she was broken.
What are you gonna do?
Ooh, she says, he just ruined my life, and I am going to tell his wife.
She gets into panic mode.
Lintel tracks down Robert's address
but nothing could prepare her for the next shock.
She sees not a palatial estate as Dr. Robert Marks had described.
She's mortified when she discovers it is a mobile home.
Friend Janet, Robert Marks had been lying to Lintel Washington about his pending divorce. And a lot more.
Not only were he and his wife still very much together, but he also wasn't as well off and successful as he made himself out to be.
What really did it wasn't a two-story house. But the wife was upstairs and he was downstairs. And she saw that it was a trailer.
In a trailer park.
For Lintel, in her mind, Robert has been giving her this like snowball of lies. And seeing this trailer is like this snowball coming to the bottom of the hill and exploding.
She's feeling really played, and she's in so much pain emotionally that I was trying to calm her down.
I don't know. People are going to just think I'm a homewrecker. No one is going to care that he lied to me.
She asked me, do you think I should see him face to face? And I tell her, yes. You need to look him in his eyes.
So she decided to set up a meeting with him.
Once Robert got back from his cruise, Lintel arranged to meet with him.
She was going to tell him that he was not going to just walk away and leave her to support their child on her own. If that's what he thought, he was mistaken.
The meeting was supposed to be on Wednesday night, the night before the police found Lintel's car.
Now it appears to detectives that Robert may have had a motive to harm Lintel.
They believe that if his wife found out, she would leave him.
After all they've learned, detectives contact Robert and ask him to come in for questioning.
They let him know that they're looking for Lintel. He says he tried to call her this morning and he didn't get an answer.
They ask him point blank, did you meet up with Lintel? And he's open and honest about it.
Yeah, we met up in a Walmart in the parking lot.
Dr. Marks tells the detectives that when they met, he came in his motorcycle and she came in her car.
He says they talked for half an hour and then he left and he rode around to a local sports bar.
He said, I watched the game for a while and I had a couple of beers and I went home for the evening.
As far as other interactions, he's denying that they spoke any further.
I'm going to ask you straight up. Did you do something to Lintel?
Absolutely not.
Because we don't believe she's just missing.
Oh my God, really?
They go on to explain that she is not just missing, she's hurt.
And there's a lot of blood in that car, Robert.
At which point, they ask him if his wife knew about the affair.
He says that his wife had no idea.
Robert also denies that Lintel ever threatened to tell his wife about the affair.
No, that'd be news to me.
Robert seems pretty convincing. He acts as though everything was fine.
After talking to Robert, detectives call his wife Angela down to the station to follow up.
They're wondering if maybe she found out about the affair.
Maybe she followed him that night and found out he met up with Lintel.
We'd like to talk to you about your husband.
But that seems less likely once detectives meet with her.
His what?
They talked to her about her husband and Lintel, and they disclosed to her that they've been having this affair.
She is shocked and genuinely devastated that Robert is seeing someone else.
No.
But she goes on to tell the police that Robert's not the type of person that she could see harming anybody.
When asked where Robert was on the night in question, she confirms he went out on his motorcycle.
He was going to go to the bar and have a few drinks and watch the game. And when he came home, she was in the bed asleep.
They ask her what she was doing that night, and she says she stayed home with the children.
The detectives, after questioning her for a period of time, They believe what she's telling them, and she seems pretty authentic and sincere.
I'll walk you out.
Robert's alibi is weak, but since he did admit to meeting Lintel that night, detectives follow up on that information first.
Detectives head to Walmart to see if they have a surveillance video.
But unfortunately, there's no footage of the parking lot.
So they go to the bar and they talk to the manager.
Detectives ask to review the restaurant's security footage from that night.
Nowhere on the video footage do they see Robert. And so this is starting to raise more red flags for the detectives.
But even without an alibi, can they actually place him at the scene?
That's what detectives are hoping to do when they're finally able to observe an interview with Lintel's little girl.
The Child Advocacy Center has counselors that work with children after there has been some trauma. One of those counselors sits down to talk to Lintel's daughter.
They get her comfortable and they start questioning her.
It soon becomes clear she not only witnessed what happened, she knew who was responsible.
Do you know who hurt your mommy?
Mr. Robbie.
Her interview with a child advocacy counselor, Lintel Washington's young daughter has just identified her mother's killer as Mr. Robbie.
The detectives assume that Mr. Robbie is Robert Marks.
This is the married man who Lintel had been having an affair with after he had wrongly led her to believe he was getting divorced.
Lintel and Robert had been in this relationship for a while. Who else could it be?
Lintel's daughter also says it was Mr. Robbie who put the blood in her mother's car.
They ask if she saw Mr. Robbie hurt Mommy, and she says yes. And she heard a boom when he hurt her mom.
The more the detectives hear Lintel's daughter speak, they are now starting to believe that Lintel has been shot.
Do you know where your mommy is right now?
Mr. Robbie put her in the lake.
So in the detective's mind, it's not if Lintel is alive. It's how do we go find her body?
Based on the daughter's statement, detectives secure a warrant for Robert's arrest and take him into custody.
They bring him in hopes that he will tell them where Lintel's body is, or at least what happened.
Instead, he invokes his right to an attorney and maintains his silence.
So they hit a dead end with Robert, but that doesn't stop their investigation.
Detectives still face the daunting task of finding Lintel.
And her daughter's statement of mommy is in the lake doesn't exactly narrow things down geographically.
In a place like Baton Rouge, that could be anywhere.
You're in an area that is overrun with bayous and lakes.
There's also miles of drainage and irrigation canals.
And 630 square mile Lake Pontchartrain is only an hour away.
They're worried that if she's in one of these bayous, or if she's in one of these lakes, they won't be able to find the body.
Being that the detectives know that they have their work cut out for them, one of the first things they do is subpoena both Lintel's and Dr. Mark's cell phone records.
When detectives receive Lintel's phone records, they prove especially compelling when compared with Robert's cell phone data.
Lintel and Robert did meet up at the parking lot that night.
The data trail shows that both phones are traveling individually to the same location. Then both phones travel together at a location north of Baton Rouge.
This is near where the sheriff's department has a pistol range.
They move from the gun range and they go across the Mississippi River.
They travel via the Huey Long Bridge to rural Iberville Parish.
This is roughly a 30, 40-minute drive, depending on traffic.
Both phone stops in the vicinity of a small farming community, and then they head back to Baton Rouge.
And when they come back, you see that Lintel's phone suddenly goes dark.
It stops in the vicinity of University Lake.
It's just east of LSU's campus, and not far from the parking lot where Lintel's daughter and car were later found.
The detectives bring in the dive team to search.
Unfortunately, they are unable to locate Lintel's body.
So, the search continues.
It is a huge effort covering several miles. Miles of forests, fields, and bayous.
And because the area is remote and towers are relatively few and far between, it's harder to triangulate exactly where Lintel might be with any precision.
But then, after several days of searching unsuccessfully, authorities get a surprising call from a local farmer.
He had found a dead body in an irrigation ditch.
"5 days after Lintel Washington disappeared from Baton Rouge, a local farmer has found a dead body in a drainage ditch.
It's discovered across the Mississippi River in rural Iberville Parish.
That's an area where phone records place both Lintel and her lover, Robert Marks, on the night she went missing.
When the body is discovered, it's so badly decomposed that no one can immediately identify it.
But detectives have little doubt. It is Lintel Washington.
The news of her likely discovery hits Lintel's family and friends hard.
In those 5 days, I kept thinking, she's unconscious. She's at a hospital. I just kept trying to hang on to some type of hope. So he let me know that she was not okay. I almost passed out.
When the autopsy results come back, they confirm the body is indeed Lintel's, and she died a violent death.
She was shot, one shot in the head at point-blank range.
But the part that really broke me was she wasn't killed right away. She actually lives till the next day. So maybe we could have saved her if we would have got to her sooner.
The report also confirms that she was carrying Robert's baby.
The fetus was far enough along that it could have survived if medical intervention had occurred.
As a result, the prosecutors charged Dr. Marks not only for the death of Lintel, but also for the death of her unborn child.
But as tragic as the autopsy results are, will the prosecutors be able to secure a conviction?
There's only circumstantial evidence.
When the trial begins on December 13th, 2021, prosecutors lay out their case.
Prosecutors proposed that when Lintel asked to meet up that night, he saw an opportunity to get rid of his problem.
You got some explaining to do.
I know. But can we not do this here?
Come on.
He gets off his motorcycle, gets in the car with Lintel and her child, and that they drive to another location to talk.
He takes her out to the shooting range.
We need to talk.
I'm sorry, your daughter.
They get out the car.
Yeah, I don't think she can hear us out here.
But she does hear what comes next.
He pulls the gun and shoots her.
Remember, the little girl said she heard a big boom.
Then he loads her in the car and he drives her across the river and dumps her body.
From there, Robert headed back into town, likely tossing Lintel's phone in the lake as he drove by.
He then brings the car back and drops it off in the parking lot with her daughter in the car.
He abandons the car and heads back to his motorcycle.
It was not something in the heat of the moment. This is something he actually planned.
But this elaborate plan had one glaring hole.
Lintel's little girl.
He was really hoping that something happened to her indirectly. She could have been kidnapped. She could have been hit by a car.
Anyone could have came along and picked that child up, and no one would have been the wiser.
But he was wrong.
So, prosecutors have Lintel's daughter take the stand.
They don't ask her many questions, but they do play the video of her telling what happened to her mom.
Hearing the emotion and the innocence, that was raw.
I was so proud of her daughter because all the things her mom taught her, she implemented. She was still, yes, sir, no, sir.
But will a little girl's taped testimony be enough evidence to convict a well-respected man?
The defense certainly tries to cast doubt.
In trial, he sat there as if he was going to get off.
They refrained from mounting a strong cross-examination of Lintel's daughter, but instead accused the child's counselors of misconduct.
The defense says that Lintel's daughter was coached.
They also point out that there is no murder weapon or DNA tying Robert to the crime.
So without her testimony, there's not enough evidence to convict Robert Marks.
But their efforts are in vain.
After hearing the entire case, it's pretty obvious that the jury didn't believe Robert's defense team's theory of what happened. And they came back with a guilty verdict in 30 minutes.
The mountain of evidence that the prosecution had, you could not refute it.
He was convicted on all charges.
The judge sentences him to life without parole.
There were tears of joy that swift justice had been served.
Poor Lintel was looking for love and a family, and she met with Robert Marks.
That was a cold man. No one else mattered but him. Then that's what put him behind bars.
His calculating web of lies ultimately took 2 innocent lives.
No one deserves to be killed because they made a decision to be involved with someone. And that unborn child didn't even have the opportunity to live.
She didn't do anything wrong. She just trusted him. And now she's gone because he was the one that was lusting and lying.
Lintel's memory now lives on in her daughter. She's been raised by her father, and he can see the intelligence in her, and he sees a lot of Lintel in his daughter.
She has a long, hard road in front of her. I hope and I pray that she can grow up and finds peace someday.
And while Lintel's daughter may only have a few memories of her, she can know that she stood up for her mother when it mattered.
I think it's important to tell the story of Lintel. I think it's important for her daughter to know that there are people that are still praying and supporting her. And I think it's important so that other women, if they find themselves in a situation similar to this, get out. Don't take any chances.
Honolulu, Hawaii, is a place that exists in the collective imagination as a permanent paradise. It is a landscape defined by the relentless, Rhythmic crashing of the Pacific Ocean against ancient volcanic rock, the heavy scent of tropical flora lingering in the humid air, and the golden warmth of a sun that seems to shine with a particular kind of forgiveness. In the year 1977, this idyllic image was perhaps even more pronounced. It was an era before the frantic, hyper-connected reality of the modern world took hold. There were no smartphones recording every mundane moment, no satellite networks tracing the exact coordinates of our daily routines, and no digital footprints left behind with every step we took. Life on the island moved at its own deliberate, analog pace. The world was tactile and deeply physical. Memories were captured on delicate film that had to be carefully developed in darkrooms. Conversations happened face-to-face or through the heavy plastic receivers of rotary telephones, and secrets, if buried deep enough, had a very real chance of staying hidden forever. But beneath the postcard-perfect veneer of swaying palm trees and endless stretches of white sand, Honolulu was still a living, breathing city. And like any city, it contained deep shadows. It was a place where ordinary people lived ordinary lives, complete with human flaws, quiet tragedies, and, occasionally, acts of unspeakable darkness that would forever alter the fabric of a community and shatter the illusion of absolute safety. There is an unspoken social contract that we all intuitively accept when it comes to the institutions that shape our youth. A high school is universally understood to be a sanctuary. It is a vital, transitional space between the protected innocence of childhood and the unforgiving realities of the adult world. Within the walls of a school, teenagers are supposed to be completely safe from the predators that roam the outside world. They are meant to worry about impending history exams, the complex social dynamics of the crowded cafeteria, the thrill of Friday night football games, and the agonizing uncertainty of adolescent romances. The physical structure of a school, with its long, echoing hallways, rows of metallic lockers, chalk-dusted classrooms, and sprawling athletic fields, is specifically designed to be a fortress of routine and predictability. McKinley High School in Honolulu was absolutely no exception to this rule. For generations, it had stood proudly as a cornerstone of the local community, a familiar place where the youth of the island gathered to learn, to grow, and to plan futures that stretched out before them like the endless ocean horizon. Parents dropped their children off at the campus gates every single morning with the absolute, unquestioned assumption that they would return home safely at the end of the day. The idea that violent, malicious harm could penetrate this heavily guarded sanctuary was practically inconceivable. It was a thought far too horrifying to entertain, a nightmare that belonged strictly in the realm of fiction, not in the bright, sunlit reality of a beautiful Hawaiian morning. Yet, history is entirely indifferent to our desperate assumptions of safety. It does not respect the invisible boundaries we draw around our most vulnerable spaces. On the morning of Monday, March 21st, 1977, the sun rose over the island of Oahu exactly as it had the day before. The pre-dawn sky lightened from a deep, velvety indigo to a bruised purple, eventually settling into a brilliant, cloudless blue that promised another beautiful day. The city slowly woke up. Commuters began their routine drives along the winding coastal roads. Local businesses unrolled their faded canvas awnings, and the warm morning breeze swept gently through the sprawling campus of McKinley High School. The school grounds were slowly waking up, transitioning from the quiet, empty stillness of the weekend to the chaotic, vibrant energy of a brand new academic week. As the hands of the clock crept inevitably towards 7:30, the first waves of students began to arrive on the property. They walked through the familiar concrete entrances, carrying heavy backpacks slung over their shoulders, holding half-finished cups of coffee, and exchanging sleepy, casual greetings with their friends. They were entirely immersed in the mundane microdramas of their teenage lives, completely and tragically unaware of the grim reality that existed just a few short yards away from them as they walked to their lockers. They walked past the manicured green lawns, beneath the expansive shade of the large campus trees, and alongside the multi-story buildings that housed their daily classrooms. They laughed together. They complained bitterly about unfinished homework assignments. they gossiped in hushed tones about the events of the previous weekend. They were breathing the fresh morning air, blissfully blind to the horrific fact that they were walking directly into an active crime scene. Somewhere in the immediate vicinity, elevated just slightly above the innocent, ringing chatter of the morning arrivals, the unthinkable had already occurred. Within the familiar confines of one of those very buildings, an environment explicitly dedicated to education, growth, and safety, a terrifying nightmare had violently materialized and then vanished into the dark, silent hours of the early morning. It left behind a heavy silence so profound and unnatural that it would echo through the halls for nearly half a century. It is deeply unsettling to consider that hundreds of people can go about their normal routines, completely oblivious to the fact that they are operating directly on the periphery of a monstrous, unforgivable act. The countless students of McKinley High School began their Monday morning wrapped securely in a protective bubble of ignorance. But that invisible bubble was incredibly fragile, and it was only a matter of time before it would be irreparably shattered by a gruesome discovery that would alter the history of the school forever. To truly understand the immense gravity of this story, we must confront the terrifying paradox that fundamentally defines the coldest of cold cases. There is a specific, suffocating kind of agony attached to an unsolved murder, a slow-burning psychological torture that relentlessly infects the families of the victims, the exhausted investigators who work the files, and the nervous community that is left constantly looking over its shoulder. When a young life is violently taken and the person responsible simply slips away unnoticed into the general population, the natural order of the universe feels fundamentally broken. But the most haunting, inescapable aspect of this particular narrative is not just the sheer brutality of the crime itself, nor is it merely the heartbreaking, stolen youth of the teenage victim. It is the overwhelming concept of time itself, and how time interacts with the microscopic, invisible remnants of human existence left behind in the dark. In 1977, a killer committed a horrific act of violence and genuinely believed he had gotten away clean. He walked away from the McKinley High School campus under the cover of darkness, entirely confident that the analog world of the late 70s possessed absolutely no tools capable of unmasking his hidden identity. And for a very long time, he was absolutely right about that assumption. The forensic technology of that era was woefully inadequate to confront the biological secrets he carelessly left behind. The dedicated detectives who responded to the tragic scene, armed with nothing but black fingerprint dust, physical photographs, and their own deductive reasoning, were essentially operating completely in the dark. The killer made one critical, invisible mistake. He left behind a biological signature, a microscopic fragment of his genetic identity, silently deposited at the scene of his brutal crime. At the time it was discovered, this microscopic evidence was practically meaningless to the naked eye. It was carefully collected, meticulously cataloged, placed into a sterile container, and locked away in the dark, temperature-controlled confines of an evidence room. And there it sat in total silence. While the evidence waited patiently in the dark, the world outside continued to turn at a relentless pace. Days bled into months, and months stretched into decades. The teenagers who had walked onto the McKinley High School campus that tragic morning eventually graduated and moved on. They started careers, got married, and had children of their own who eventually navigated those same high school years. The teachers retired, their faces lined with age. Decades passed, and the victim remained permanently frozen in time, forever 16 years old, while the person responsible walked free, experiencing the very passage of time he had stolen from her. Yet, while time is a cruel thief, it is also an agent of extraordinary revelation. While the world above ground changed, science was quietly catching up to the secrets buried in the evidence lockers. This is the true story of a young girl whose innocent life was violently taken in a place she should have been completely safe, and the haunting story of how a microscopic piece of evidence, locked away in the dark for nearly half a century, finally decided to speak. To understand the profound tragedy of what occurred at McKinley High School, it is absolutely essential to first look past the clinical, detached details of the police file and focus entirely on the human life that was so violently extinguished. Dawn Mamahara was only 16 years old in the spring of 1977. She was not a rebellious outlier living on the dangerous fringes of society, nor was she involved in any illicit activities that might predictably invite violence into her world. She was, by all accounts, a profoundly ordinary teenager living a remarkably normal life in Honolulu. She possessed all the bright, untapped potential that naturally accompanies youth. She had a loving family who cared deeply for her well-being, a close-knit circle of friends who shared her daily experiences, and a future that should have stretched out before her for decades. She walked the same hallways, studied in the same classrooms, and navigated the exact same complex social hierarchies as every other student at McKinley High School. Her days were predictably structured around the familiar rhythms of the academic calendar, filled with homework assignments, extracurricular activities, weekend social gatherings, and the quiet, personal dreams that occupy the mind of a 16-year-old girl standing on the precipice of adulthood. She had dreams that would never be realized, milestones she would never reach. She would never attend her high school graduation, never experience the nervous excitement of a first real job, never build a life of her own. Her existence was forcefully truncated right at the moment it was truly beginning to blossom. It is this exact ordinariness that makes her sudden, brutal death so deeply unsettling. She represented the universal innocence of adolescence. When we think of victims of violent crime, human nature instinctively searches for a reason, a misstep, or a risky decision that might somehow explain the tragedy and mentally distance ourselves from the danger. But looking at Dawn, there is absolutely no such comfort to be found. She was simply a young girl existing in her own community, entirely undeserving of the darkness that was quietly closing in around her. The heartbreaking reality is that she was completely unaware of the threat, living her final days with the effortless assumption of tomorrow that is the fundamental privilege of youth. The sequence of events that ultimately led to the tragedy began to unfold on the evening of Sunday, March 20th, 1977. Sunday evenings always carry a distinct, slightly melancholic atmosphere, serving as the quiet bridge between the freedom of the weekend and the structured obligations of the impending school week. Families across Honolulu were likely winding down, finishing their dinners, preparing their clothes for the next morning, and settling into the comfortable routines of evening. It was during this ordinary, quiet Sunday evening that the trajectory of Dawn Mamahara's life was irreversibly altered by a single, seemingly mundane event. The telephone inside her family home began to ring. In the modern era, a ringing phone is accompanied by a glowing screen displaying a name, a photograph, or a familiar sequence of numbers, instantly providing context and identity before the conversation even begins. But in the late 1970s, the ringing of a heavy, rotary telephone was always an absolute mystery until the receiver was physically lifted. The mechanical bell would echo through the house, demanding attention, completely anonymous in its urgency. Someone inside the Mamahara household answered the call, and it was quickly determined that the person on the other end of the line was an unidentified male asking specifically to speak with Dawn. The true nature of that conversation remains one of the most agonizing, impenetrable mysteries of the entire investigation. The exact words that were exchanged between the 16-year-old girl and the unidentified man are lost to history, swallowed entirely by the passage of time and the profound limitations of the era. Whatever was said, however, was persuasive enough to alter Dawn's plans for that Sunday evening. Following the conclusion of that mysterious phone conversation, Dawn sought out her mother to inform her of a sudden change in her schedule. She casually explained that she was going to leave the house to visit a nearby shopping center, noting that she would be meeting up with her friends. There was absolutely nothing in her demeanor, her tone of voice, or her explanation that would trigger any immediate alarm in a parent. Going to a local shopping center was a perfectly standard, universally accepted activity for a teenager in Honolulu. It was a safe, public environment, a brightly lit hub of social interaction where young people frequently gathered to walk around, look at store windows, and spend time together away from the immediate supervision of their parents. Her mother, trusting her daughter and seeing absolutely no reason for concern in this perfectly normal request, watched as Dawn prepared to leave. She watched her 16-year-old daughter walk out the door, stepping into the mild, tropical evening air of Honolulu. That brief, unremarkable interaction, a casual farewell that happens millions of times a day in households all across the world, would carry an unimaginable, crushing weight in the years to come. It was the absolute last time her mother would ever look upon her daughter alive. The profound cruelty of that moment lies in its complete lack of warning. There was no grand farewell, no lingering embrace, and no ominous premonition of the terror that was about to unfold. It was simply a teenager walking out the door on a Sunday evening, fully expecting to return home a few hours later, stepping blindly off the edge of a precipice into an endless nightmare. The departure of Dawn Mamahara that evening forces us to confront a series of haunting, unanswerable questions that have tormented investigators and her family for decades. Who exactly was the man on the other end of the telephone? Was it a casual acquaintance, a classmate from McKinley High School, or someone significantly older who had managed to insert himself into her periphery? And most importantly, was that phone call a deliberate, calculated lure designed specifically to draw her out of the safety of her home, or was it merely a tragic, unrelated coincidence that simply placed her in the wrong location at precisely the wrong time? If the caller was indeed the predator who would later take her life, it suggests a chilling level of premeditation and manipulation. It implies that the killer knew how to reach her, knew how to persuade her, and confidently orchestrated a meeting that would ultimately end in unspeakable violence. Conversely, if the phone call was completely innocent and unrelated to the murder, it means that Dawn embarked on a mundane trip to the shopping center and happened to cross paths with a random, opportunistic monster lurking in the shadows of Honolulu. Both scenarios are equally terrifying, and the inability to definitively prove either theory has remained a massive, agonizing void at the very center of the case. The identity of the caller is the missing keystone, the single piece of information that could illuminate the dark sequence of events that led Dawn from the safety of her home to the cold, concrete floor of a high school building. To fully grasp why this specific question remains unanswered, it is necessary to examine the profound technological void that characterized criminal investigations in the year 1977. Today, a detective faced with a similar set of circumstances would have an immense, nearly omnipotent arsenal of digital tools at their immediate disposal. They would instantly obtain a subpoena for the victim's cellular phone records, identifying the exact phone number, the precise duration of the call, and the registered owner of the device that contacted her. They would utilize cell tower data to trace the physical movements of both the victim and the suspect throughout the evening, mapping their exact paths with terrifying precision. They would scour endless hours of high-definition security camera footage from the surrounding neighborhood, the transit routes, and the shopping center itself, easily tracking the victim's visual progress and identifying anyone who approached her. They would dig deeply into her social media accounts, uncovering hidden conversations, digital connections, and electronic footprints that paint a comprehensive picture of her social universe. But the detectives who took on the Mamahara case in the late 70s were operating in a world that was entirely blind by modern standards. There was no caller identification to record the incoming number. There were no cell phone towers pinging locations into the ether. There were no ubiquitous security cameras documenting every public interaction. When the physical connection of that phone call was severed, the electronic trace vanished completely into the atmosphere, leaving absolutely nothing behind but a fading memory. The investigators had to knock on physical doors, hoping someone remembered seeing a specific car or a specific face in the dark. They had to sift through physical paper records, rely on tip lines that were often filled with dead ends, and pray that human conscience would eventually compel someone to speak. It was an agonizingly slow, manual process of elimination that starkly contrasts with the rapid, data-driven investigations of today. The technological limitations of the era effectively provided an impenetrable shield of anonymity for the caller, allowing them to fade seamlessly back into the crowded population of the city. This immense, frustrating lack of information transformed the crucial hours between Dawn leaving her home and the horrific discovery of her body into a permanent, dark abyss, setting the stage for an investigation that would ultimately span nearly half a century in a desperate search for the truth. The vibrant energy of a Monday morning at McKinley High School was abruptly severed at approximately 7:30 in the morning on March 21, 1977. As students continued to pour through the campus gates, laughing and preparing for their first period classes, the harsh, unmistakable sound of police sirens began to wail in the distance, cutting sharply through the humid tropical air. The sirens grew progressively louder, shifting from a distant warning to an immediate, blaring reality as Honolulu Police Department cruisers aggressively pulled onto the school grounds. The flashing red and blue lights cast long, frantic shadows against the concrete walls of the academic buildings, completely shattering the illusion of the peaceful morning. Students stopped in their tracks, their conversations instantly dying in their throats as they watched heavily armed officers step out of their vehicles with an alarming sense of urgency. These were not the friendly neighborhood patrolmen stopping by for a routine check, but rather seasoned investigators responding to a dispatch call that carried the darkest possible implications. The officers quickly cordoned off the perimeter, their faces set in grim expressions that immediately communicated the absolute severity of the situation. They bypassed the bustling courtyards and the administrative offices, making their way directly toward one of the instructional buildings. With heavy footsteps echoing against the linoleum floors, they ascended the stairwell to the second floor. Every step they took upwards was a step away from the innocent world of high school and a step deeper into a nightmare that had permanently stained the institution. The air grew heavier as they approached the specific location, the typical sense of floor wax and old paper suddenly replaced by the cold, metallic reality of a crime scene waiting to be meticulously documented. When the investigators finally reached the designated area on the second floor, they were confronted with a visual reality that would forever haunt their professional memories. The crime scene was not hidden away in a dense, inaccessible forest or abandoned in a decaying, forgotten warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was situated right there, in a brightly lit space designed specifically for the education and advancement of the youth. Lying motionless on the cold floor was the body of 16-year-old Dawn Mamahara. The stark, clinical description documented in the official police reports presents an incredibly grim picture that stands in horrifying contrast to the vibrant teenager she had been just hours prior. She was found lying on her back, her posture stripped of all natural grace and reduced to the tragic stillness of death. Her clothing had been partially removed, a distressing detail that immediately signaled to the experienced detectives that this was not a simple accident or a sudden medical emergency, but a targeted, malicious act of interpersonal violence. Most chilling of all was the presence of a bright orange cloth, drawn tight and wrapped securely around her fragile neck. That piece of fabric, brightly colored and entirely out of place, served as the terrifying focal point of the scene. It was the instrument of her destruction, a visceral manifestation of the sheer physical force and brutal intent that the perpetrator had unleashed upon her. The juxtaposition was entirely sickening. The chalkboard, the student desks, the educational posters lining the walls, all the standard accoutrements of adolescent learning were now silent witnesses to a monstrous cruelty. The building itself felt violated, its fundamental purpose violently subverted by a killer who treated the school not as a sanctuary, but as a hunting ground. The subsequent medical examination confirmed the absolute worst fears of the investigators and plunged the case into an even deeper level of darkness. The official autopsy determined beyond any shadow of a doubt that the primary cause of death was ligature strangulation, directly linked to that suffocating orange cloth. Strangulation is an exceptionally intimate and deeply terrifying method of murder. It is not an instantaneous, detached act like a gunshot fired from a distance. It requires physical proximity, sustained physical exertion, and a cold, unwavering determination to extinguish a human life as the victim looks back at their attacker. It means that Dawn's final moments were filled with unimaginable panic, a desperate, breathless struggle for survival against a force that ultimately overpowered her. The medical examiner also confirmed the presence of evidence indicating that Dawn had been subjected to a sexual assault prior to her death. This agonizing revelation added a layer of profound degradation to the already incomprehensible violence. The perpetrator had not only stolen her life, but had also violently stripped her of her dignity in her final, terrifying hours. Knowing this forces a sickening realization about the sheer vulnerability she must have experienced, trapped in the dark within the walls of a place where she had spent countless hours feeling entirely safe and secure. The brutal, predatory nature of the crime made it glaringly obvious that the person responsible was incredibly dangerous, someone completely devoid of human empathy, and someone who is now walking freely among the citizens of Honolulu, carrying the darkest of secrets. The absolute horror of these clinical facts transformed the investigation from a standard procedural duty into a desperate, urgent hunt for a monster. News of the tragedy did not wait for an official administrative announcement to spread through the student body. Like a dark, invisible contagion, rumors began to whisper their way through the hallways, the cafeteria, and the courtyards with terrifying speed. Teenagers possess an uncanny ability to sense when the atmospheric pressure of their environment has fundamentally shifted, and on that Monday morning, the air at McKinley High School felt remarkably heavy and suffocating. Students knew that something catastrophic had occurred long before they knew the specific details. They saw the police tape, they watched the grim faces of the faculty, and they felt an instinctive, primal sense of dread wash over the campus. Among the thousands of students navigating this bizarre and frightening atmosphere was 15-year-old Suzanne Chun Oakland, a young woman who would later grow up to serve as a prominent political figure in Hawaii. Years later, she would clearly recall the deeply unsettling, almost surreal environment of the school that day. She remembered the profound confusion, the hushed, anxious conversations, and the overwhelming feeling that their collective innocence had been suddenly and violently stolen. There was an intense, collective anxiety gripping the student population because the terrifying truth of the situation was impossible to ignore. A young girl, one of their own peers, had been brutally murdered within the perimeter of their daily lives. The most horrifying aspect of this realization was the lingering, unspoken question that haunted everyone on campus regarding the identity and the current location of the killer. For all the students knew, the perpetrator could have been a random outsider who had slipped away into the city, or, far more terrifyingly, it could have been someone intimately familiar with the school, someone who might even be walking the very same hallways, seamlessly blending in with the terrified crowd. The agonizing reality of the murder hit with the most devastating impact inside the school's music department, completely destroying the emotional stability of the students gathered there. Grant Okamura, who was serving as the dedicated band teacher at the time, later provided a heartbreaking account of how the tragedy specifically unfolded for the victim's own family. Dawn's younger sister, entirely oblivious to the nightmare that had consumed her sibling, had arrived at school that morning expecting nothing more than a standard day of classes and band practice. She walked onto the campus, perhaps passing the very building where the crime scene was currently being processed, completely unaware that her entire world had already been shattered. Shortly after her arrival, she was summoned from her normal routine and called down to the main administrative office. It was there, surrounded by somber school officials and grim-faced police officers, that she was delivered the soul-crushing news. The innocent younger sister learned that Dawn was never coming home again. Following this unimaginable revelation, she returned to the familiar sanctuary of the band room. Okamura vividly recalled the sight of the young girl entering the space in a state of total, catastrophic emotional collapse. She was physically and mentally broken by the weight of the grief, unable to process the sheer magnitude of the loss. The other students in the room, adolescents themselves who were ill-equipped to handle such profound tragedy, rushed to surround her, desperately trying to offer comfort and solace where absolutely none could be found. The scheduled lesson was entirely abandoned, The instruments lay silent in their cases as the room was consumed by the raw, visceral sounds of mourning. In that single, excruciating moment in the band room, the abstract horror of a police investigation became a deeply personal, bleeding wound for the students, permanently scarring their youth and marking the day their high school ceased to be a safe haven and became the site of an unforgettable, lifelong trauma. As the shockwave of the morning's horrific discovery rippled through the traumatized McKinley High School campus, the Honolulu Police Department rapidly mobilized to construct a meticulous timeline of Don Mamahara's final hours. The immediate objective of any homicide investigation is to work backward from the precise moment of discovery, meticulously retracing the victim's physical steps to locate the exact intersection where their path tragically collided with the perpetrator. Detectives aggressively interviewed grief-stricken family members, bewildered classmates, and devastated friends, desperately trying to illuminate the dark, silent gap between her casual departure from her family home on Sunday evening and the brutal, undeniable reality of Monday morning. They knew she had explicitly stated her intention to visit a nearby shopping center, a profoundly mundane teenage excursion that should have concluded with her safe, uneventful return to her bedroom. How did a 16-year-old girl, ostensibly en route to a bustling, public commercial district to meet her friends, ultimately arrive at the dark, deserted campus of her own high school in the dead of night? Was she forcibly taken from the streets of Honolulu, abducted, and transported to the educational facility entirely against her will, or was she cleverly manipulated and lured directly to the familiar grounds by someone she explicitly trusted? The physical location of the crime scene strongly suggested an element of chilling premeditation and a deep, unsettling familiarity with the environment. The killer did not merely abandon her in a random, convenient alleyway or a secluded stretch of untamed wilderness. They deliberately chose the interior of an academic building, a specific location that required intimate knowledge of the campus layout, hidden access points, and the isolated nature of the grounds during the late evening hours. This chilling deduction narrowed the theoretical profile of the suspect, strongly hinting at a terrifying proximity to the school environment itself, but it simultaneously amplified the desperate, burning urgency to find a concrete witness who could finally bridge the agonizing gap in the timeline and provide a face to the monster hiding in the shadows. Amidst the frustrating, overwhelming lack of clarity, a singular, incredibly vital piece of information emerged from the shadows, offering a fleeting, tantalizing glimpse into the events of that fateful Sunday night. The monumental breakthrough arrived in the form of a civilian eyewitness account, a testament to the random, unpredictable nature of criminal investigations where a seemingly insignificant observation can suddenly transform into the foundational pillar of a major homicide case. A local man, driving through the quiet, softly lit streets of Honolulu with his girlfriend late on the evening of March 20th, happened to navigate his vehicle past the sprawling perimeter of the McKinley High School campus. As they casually observed the darkened school grounds through their car windows, their attention was immediately captured by a glaring anomaly that starkly contrasted with the expected, peaceful emptiness of the late hour. They distinctly observed a solitary man and a parked automobile situated directly on the manicured grass in extremely close proximity to the English building, the very same concrete structure where Dawn's vibrant life was violently extinguished just hours later. The mere presence of a heavy vehicle positioned completely off the paved asphalt road and directly onto the campus lawn late at night was inherently suspicious, an irregular, jarring sight that triggered a quiet, instinctual alarm in the mind of the passing driver. Driven by a nagging sense of curiosity and a vague, persistent feeling of unease that he could not simply ignore, the witness made the fateful, pivotal decision to turn his car around and slowly drive past the location a second time in a desperate attempt to get a clearer, more definitive look at the mysterious man and his highly unusual vehicle. However, the fragile window of opportunity had slammed shut with terrifying, inexplicable speed. When the couple completed their sweeping turn and directed their bright headlights back toward the shadow of the English building, the grassy expanse was entirely empty. The mysterious man and his distinct vehicle had vanished completely into the thick, suffocating Hawaiian night, leaving absolutely no physical trace of their presence behind and turning a potential revelation into another agonizing dead end. Despite the agonizing brevity of the visual encounter, the civilian witness was miraculously able to provide the desperate detectives with an astoundingly detailed and specific description of the mysterious vehicle, instantly transforming a vague, shadowy figure into the absolute most critical lead of the entire investigation. The automobile was definitively and confidently identified as a 1974 or 1975 Pontiac Lemons, a prominent, heavy American muscle car that possessed distinct, undeniable aesthetic characteristics that were impossible to ignore. The eyewitness meticulously detailed a striking two-tone exterior, explicitly noting that the lower body of the vehicle was painted a deep, dark red or maroon, which contrasted sharply and vividly with a bright white vinyl roof. Furthermore, the car was equipped with louvered rear windows, a highly stylized, slatted design feature that was incredibly popular during that specific era and made the vehicle immediately recognizable to any casual observer on the road. Armed with this incredibly vivid, granular description, the Honolulu Police Department aggressively launched a massive, island-wide manhunt for the maroon and white Pontiac Lemons. They quickly generated detailed, forensic sketches of both the suspected vehicle and a vague, composite outline of the unidentified man seen standing beside it. These crucial sketches were rapidly disseminated to the public through daily local television broadcasts and printed extensively in the morning newspapers, accompanied by desperate, impassioned pleas for any citizen who recognized the distinctive car to immediately contact the authorities. The detectives genuinely believed that this specific, flashy combination of colors and rare features was unique enough to guarantee a swift, definitive identification. They tirelessly scoured thousands of vehicle registration records, interviewed countless local mechanics, and followed up on hundreds of frantic, breathless tips from nervous citizens who thought they had spotted the phantom car parked in their own neighborhoods. Yet, in a cruel, deeply frustrating twist of fate, the extensive, exhaustive search yielded absolutely nothing of substance. It was as if the maroon and white Pontiac Lemons was a ghost vehicle that had materialized on the school lawn just long enough to be witnessed before dissolving entirely into the ether, leaving the desperate investigators grasping at thin air while the killer remained comfortably hidden behind an impenetrable wall of absolute anonymity. The ultimate, heartbreaking tragedy of the 1977 investigation, however, was not the vanished muscle car or the forever unidentified caller, but the agonizing reality of the microscopic physical evidence collected directly from the crime scene itself. In the immediate, chaotic aftermath of the horrific discovery, highly trained forensic technicians methodically processed Dawn Mamahara's body, painstakingly searching for any microscopic trace of the violent predator who had callously taken her life. During this incredibly grim, clinical procedure, they successfully swabbed and collected a vital biological sample from her clothing, officially securing the distinct genetic signature of an unknown male suspect. This was, without question, the absolute most critical piece of evidence in the entire cold case, an invisible, biological fingerprint that contained the exact, irrefutable identity of the murderer securely encoded within its complex cellular structure. It was the absolute truth, patiently waiting to be deciphered and brought into the light. But the crushing, inescapable tragedy of this monumental discovery was entirely a matter of cruel chronological timing. In the late 1970s, the fascinating field of forensic science was still operating in its absolute infancy compared to the miraculous, high-tech analytical capabilities of the modern era. The brilliant, complex science of DNA profiling, the revolutionary ability to extract a unique genetic blueprint from a microscopic biological sample and match it directly to a specific human being, simply did not exist in the law enforcement toolkit. The frustrated investigators held the absolute, undeniable answer to the agonizing mystery securely in their hands, but they were tragically separated from the truth by an insurmountable, towering wall of technological limitation. They simply lacked the scientific vocabulary required to read the microscopic language written in the biological evidence. Consequently, this precious material was carefully sealed inside a sterile container, meticulously labeled with Dawn's tragic case number, and quietly transported into the dark, climate-controlled depths of a police evidence storage facility. As the heavy metal door clicked shut, the investigation effectively entered a deep, prolonged state of hibernation. The immediate, burning urgency of the initial search slowly faded as promising leads inevitably dried up and the detectives were forced to direct their exhausted attention to newer, more immediate tragedies occurring across the island. The relentless, unforgiving passage of time began to march forward with a brutal indifference. 1 year passed, then 5, then 10. Entire decades slipped away into the historical record. The world outside the evidence room changed fundamentally, evolving through massive technological revolutions and sweeping cultural shifts. The students who mourned Dawn grew older, while the microscopic truth of what happened to the innocent 16-year-old girl remained perfectly preserved, sleeping silently in the absolute dark, patiently waiting for the distant future to finally arrive. For more than 4 decades, the tragic file belonging to Dawn Mamahara remained entombed within the silent and sterile archives of the Honolulu Police Department, acting as a heartbreaking testament to the extreme limitations of 20th-century forensic science. However, while the physical evidence lay dormant, in the dark, the external world of criminal investigation was undergoing a radical and unprecedented scientific revolution. By the year 2019, the incredible capabilities of advanced DNA analysis and complex forensic genealogy had evolved to a point where they routinely performed absolute miracles by breathing vibrant new life into completely stagnant investigations and identifying violent perpetrators who had successfully hidden behind the heavy veil of time. Driven by an unwavering commitment to seek justice for the forgotten 16-year-old girl, a highly specialized cold case unit officially decided to retrieve the dusty boxes from storage and subject the meticulously preserved biological evidence to modern, rigorous scientific scrutiny. Forensic experts carefully transported the original physical evidence, specifically focusing on the deeply personal garments recovered from the grim crime scene, to a state-of-the-art laboratory environment. The immense pressure resting on the shoulders of these dedicated scientists was palpable because the microscopic material represented the absolute last remaining hope for uncovering the true identity of the ruthless killer. Through a painstaking and highly complex process of modern cellular extraction, the brilliant laboratory technicians successfully achieved what their predecessors in 1977 could only desperately dream of accomplishing. By the dawn of the year 2020, they had miraculously constructed a complete, viable, and highly specific DNA profile from the microscopic biological remnants left behind by the unknown male suspect. This monumental breakthrough was nothing short of a scientific resurrection. The invisible and microscopic ghost that had stubbornly haunted the shadowed hallways of McKinley High School for 43 agonizing years finally possessed a distinct and undeniable biological signature which transformed a completely cold trail into an incredibly active and burning pursuit for absolute truth. Armed with this incredibly powerful new biological weapon, the determined cold case investigators began the arduous and frustrating process of searching for a definitive genetic match across sprawling national databases. The critical turning point in the modern investigation arrived unexpectedly in the year 2023 when law enforcement received a vital and highly specific piece of information that sharply directed their intense focus toward 2 brothers who had actually been interviewed by desperate detectives in the immediate chaotic aftermath of the initial 1977 murder investigation. The intense spotlight of the renewed investigation quickly settled on the younger of the 2 siblings, an individual named Gideon Bellamity Castro. A deep, comprehensive dive into historical school administrative records immediately revealed a chilling and undeniable geographical and chronological proximity to the horrific crime. Gideon Castro was not a random outsider wandering the streets, but a former student who had officially walked the very same concrete hallways and graduated from McKinley High School in 1976, which was a mere year before the brutal tragedy occurred. Furthermore, historical police reports indicated that Castro had willingly admitted to interacting directly with the young victim prior to her tragic death, explicitly telling the original detectives that he had personally encountered Dawn Mamahara at a bustling school dance in 1976 and had seen her again at a crowded campus carnival in February of 1977, just one short month before she was violently murdered. Recognizing the immense and terrifying potential of this historical connection, modern investigators initiated a highly sensitive and deeply covert operation to definitively eliminate or confirm the brothers as viable suspects without raising any alarms. Their strategic pursuit first led them to the sprawling metropolis of Chicago, where the older brother had quietly relocated many years prior. Operating entirely in the shadows to prevent any premature destruction of evidence, detectives successfully orchestrated the secret collection of a discarded DNA sample from the adult child of the older brother. The subsequent laboratory analysis definitively excluded the older sibling from any direct involvement, which served as a crucial scientific elimination that significantly narrowed the parameters of the complicated hunt and completely isolated the terrifying focus directly onto Gideon Castro. With the older brother officially cleared by the undeniable rigidity of modern science, the Honolulu detectives methodically tightened their invisible and strategic net around Gideon Castro. Employing the exact same highly effective and covert tactical maneuvers that had proven so successful in Chicago, the investigators managed to securely obtain a biological sample from the adult son of Castro, acting as a crucial genetic stepping stone that strongly supported their mounting suspicions and provided the strict legal justification required to aggressively pursue the primary target. Armed with this compelling familial connection, law enforcement finally moved directly against Castro himself, successfully obtaining his specific genetic material for a direct laboratory comparison with the horrific evidence preserved from the 1977 crime scene. The agonizing wait for the highly anticipated laboratory results culminated in a moment of profound and absolute vindication for the dedicated detectives who had tirelessly championed this seemingly hopeless cold case for years. The meticulous scientific analysis officially confirmed a direct, undeniable, and mathematically conclusive link between the microscopic DNA profile extracted from the tragic scene at McKinley High School and the biological signature of Gideon Castro. The invisible ghost had finally been completely unmasked. This monumental scientific revelation immediately triggered a swift and highly coordinated interstate law enforcement operation designed to bring the suspect into permanent custody. On January 21, 2025, nearly 48 agonizing years after Dawn Mamahara was brutally strangled in the dark, heavily armed officers suddenly descended upon a quiet and unassuming nursing home facility located in Mill Creek, Utah, a peaceful suburban community situated near the sprawling expanse of Salt Lake City. The man they ultimately placed in heavy steel handcuffs presented a deeply surreal and profoundly disturbing physical contrast to the terrifying and powerful monster imagined by the terrified community in 1977. The aggressive and violent predator who had callously extinguished the bright future of a young girl was now a frail 66-year-old man living out his quiet twilight years in a managed care facility. It is a deeply unsettling paradox inherent to solving historical cold cases, watching an elderly individual be suddenly confronted with the monstrous actions of their distant youth, proving that while time relentlessly physically degrades the human body, the heavy burden of unspeakable guilt remains permanently anchored to the human soul. Castro was officially placed under arrest and formally charged with second-degree murder, eventually agreeing to fully waive his constitutional right to fight extradition and paving the clear way for his highly anticipated physical return to the beautiful island of Hawaii to face the absolute and unforgiving severity of the criminal judicial system. The dramatic and highly publicized arrest in the state of Utah naturally generated an immense and sweeping wave of profound relief and a powerful sense of long overdue emotional closure for the deeply grieving community in Honolulu, creating an understandable and widespread public perception that the painful and decades-long saga had finally reached a definitive and incredibly satisfying conclusion. However, the complex, rigid, and deeply demanding reality of the American criminal justice system is rarely as straightforward or smoothly predictable as a simple solitary scientific breakthrough. When Gideon Castro finally stood up to confront the overwhelming weight of the formal legal accusations leveled against him, he firmly and unequivocally entered a defiant plea of not guilty, signaling his absolute and unwavering intention to fiercely contest the severe criminal charges and directly challenge the fundamental validity of the deeply historical physical evidence in a formal court of law. This defiant and unyielding legal posture instantly transformed the triumphant narrative from a deeply celebratory scientific victory into the grueling and highly uncertain beginning of a massive, drawn-out judicial battle. The profound and inescapable vulnerability of prosecuting a deeply historical cold case became glaringly and agonizingly apparent by the unpredictable month of March in 2025, abruptly introducing a shocking and completely unexpected legal twist that severely disrupted the powerful forward momentum of the ambitious prosecution team. A judicial official presiding over the preliminary proceedings in the state of Utah issued a stunning and controversial legal order directing the immediate physical release of Gideon Castro from secure law enforcement custody, acting as a massive and truly heartbreaking legal setback that left the hopeful public violently reeling in profound confusion and deep anger. The devastating and heavily technical rationale behind this sudden shocking release was rooted entirely in the severe and completely unavoidable complications inherently attached to trying a complex criminal case that is nearly half a century old. The prosecuting attorneys representing Honolulu were forced to formally and publicly acknowledge that they were simply not entirely prepared to confidently proceed with the incredibly complex trial at that specific moment in time. They explicitly cited sudden, deeply concerning, and completely unforeseen issues regarding the physical availability and fundamental legal reliability of a deeply critical historical civilian witness, combined simultaneously with significant and heavily contested legal challenges directly surrounding the current physical condition degradation and the strict chain of custody of the ancient physical biological evidence. This incredibly frustrating and deeply agonizing development serves as a harsh, necessary, and critically important reminder of a vital legal distinction that must absolutely be heavily emphasized to anyone following the narrative. The compelling, undeniable scientific presence of a genetic link and a formal, highly publicized police arrest absolutely do not automatically equate to a definitive permanent legal conviction in the eyes of the formal court. The Honolulu authorities remain fiercely and passionately committed to aggressively overcoming these severe logistical and legal hurdles and ultimately securing a permanent conviction, but the agonizing and inescapable reality remains that the deeply flawed and heavily degraded nature of historical evidence can incredibly easily stall the complex, grinding wheels of justice, leaving the terrifying, heartbreaking story of Dawn Mamahara trapped once again in a painful, agonizing state of legal limbo while the suspected killer peacefully walks out of custody. This dark reality ensures the horrific nightmare continues today. The tragic saga of Dawn Mamahara is not merely a historical footnote buried in the extensive criminal archives of Honolulu, but rather a profoundly haunting narrative that forces us to confront the darkest and most uncomfortable vulnerabilities of our modern society. When we collectively examine the fragmented and painful pieces of this decades-long mystery, there are several deeply disturbing elements that elevate this specific tragedy from a standard police procedural into a deeply resonant cultural nightmare. The absolute most agonizing component is undeniably the profound youth and pure innocence of the victim herself. Dawn was only 16 years old when her vibrant life was violently stolen, representing a heartbreaking loss of untapped potential and serving as a stark, terrifying reminder that horrific violence does not exclusively target those who willingly walk the dangerous fringes of the world. She was simply a child existing within the supposed absolute safety of her everyday adolescent routine. This inherent vulnerability is drastically magnified by the terrifying violation of the physical location where the ultimate brutality occurred. McKinley High School was explicitly designed and universally understood to be an absolute sanctuary for adolescent development and education, acting as a brightly lit fortress against the unpredictable dangers of the adult world. The terrifying realization that a vicious predator successfully infiltrated this fiercely protected educational space transformed a familiar community pillar into a permanent monument of unspeakable terror. Furthermore, the agonizing narrative is deeply saturated with a profound sense of tragic near misses that continually torture the minds of investigators and those who reflect upon the case. The incredibly frustrating reality that an innocent civilian eyewitness physically observed a mysterious man and a highly distinctive vehicle positioned near the exact academic building on the night of the murder creates an agonizing scenario of what might have been. If the witness had arrived mere minutes earlier, or if the visual encounter had lasted just a few seconds longer, the entire trajectory of the prolonged investigation might have shifted dramatically, preventing nearly half a century of silent agony. Compounding this immense frustration is the chilling revelation of the suspect's prior connection to the victim and the environment. The confirmed fact that the accused individual was a former student who had recently walked those exact same concrete hallways and had explicitly admitted to interacting socially with Dawn just weeks before her tragic demise adds a deeply sinister layer of psychological terror, indicating that the monster was not a faceless stranger, but someone hiding in plain sight within the peripheral vision of her own adolescent universe. Finally, the most surreal and captivating element of the entire ordeal remains the extraordinary patience of the microscopic biological evidence. The chilling reality that the absolute truth was securely locked away in a dark, climate-controlled room since 1977, patiently waiting for the relentless progression of human science to eventually develop the precise tools required to translate its complex genetic language, is a powerful testament to the enduring permanence of the truth. Despite the monumental and widely celebrated scientific breakthroughs that recently shattered the decades of frustrating silence, the complex narrative surrounding the final hours of Dawn Momahara remains deeply fractured and agonizingly incomplete. The miraculous extraction of a viable genetic profile undeniably provided law enforcement with a specific name and a physical face, but it tragically failed to illuminate the dark, terrifying sequence of events that actually unfolded on that fateful Sunday evening. A multitude of haunting, unanswerable questions continues to swirl relentlessly around the foundational facts of the cold case, demanding resolutions that may forever remain buried beneath the heavy, crushing weight of time. The absolute most critical and perplexing mystery remains the true identity and the ultimate intention of the unidentified man who confidently dialed the rotary telephone inside the Momahara household. Was that specific and entirely anonymous conversation the precise psychological mechanism that successfully lured the innocent 16-year-old girl out of the safety of her family home and directly into the waiting arms of her brutal killer, or was it merely a completely unrelated mundane interaction that tragically coincided with a random opportunistic attack later in the evening? The sheer technological inability of the late 1970s to permanently trace the origin of that fatal communication created an absolute void of information that modern forensic science is fundamentally incapable of filling. Equally frustrating is the unresolved visual enigma of the maroon and white Pontiac lemons parked conspicuously on the campus lawn. While the genetic evidence undeniably places Gideon Castro at the exact center of the terrifying narrative, the public record has not yet definitively clarified whether he was the mysterious individual physically observed by the passing civilian driver, or if the vehicle itself played a direct mechanical role in the transportation or the physical confinement of the young victim. We're left to endlessly agonize over the terrifying logistics of the crime, desperately trying to understand how Dawn ultimately transitioned from her anticipated social outing at the local shopping center to the dark, isolated corridors of the second-floor English building. Did she willingly enter a vehicle under the tragic guise of friendly familiarity, or was she violently ambushed and forcibly relocated against her will to the familiar school grounds? The deeply disturbing presence of the brightly colored orange cloth utilized as the lethal instrument of strangulation introduces yet another layer of chilling complexity, hinting at a disturbing level of premeditation and a dark, specific ritualistic violence that remains entirely unexplained by the clinical laboratory results. The DNA can confidently identify who was intimately present during the violent assault, but it is completely blind to the terrifying psychological motivations, the specific spoken words, and the profound physical terror that characterize the final agonizing moments of her stolen life. The profound and relentless passage of nearly half a century fundamentally alters the entire emotional and physical landscape of a criminal investigation, creating a bizarre and deeply unsettling reality where the past and the present violently collide. When we reflect upon the massive chronological chasm separating the brutal murder in 1977 from the dramatic law enforcement arrest in 2025, we are forced to acknowledge the immense, devastating collateral damage inflicted by the prolonged absence of definitive justice. The tragic concept of a cold case is not merely a bureaucratic designation indicating a lack of active police leads, but rather a living, breathing psychological trauma that continually infects and degrades the surviving community. The grieving family of Don Mamahara was forcefully condemned to endure a lifelong agonizing sentence of absolute uncertainty, perpetually haunted by the terrifying knowledge that the ruthless individual responsible for completely destroying their universe was likely walking freely, experiencing the fundamental joys of life and completely escaping any earthly accountability. They were forced to navigate the incredibly painful milestones of their own lives, silently carrying an incredibly heavy burden of grief that could never truly be resolved while the agonizing mystery remained entirely unsolved. The beautiful island community of Honolulu was similarly scarred by the lingering dark shadow of the unresolved brutality, an invisible permanent stain on the collective memory of McKinley High School that transformed a beautiful, thriving campus into a constant somber reminder of an unpunished evil. The sheer surrealism of finally apprehending a prime suspect who was biologically transitioned into a frail elderly man residing quietly in a suburban nursing home forces us to confront the deeply uncomfortable paradox of delayed accountability. The aggressive, violently capable young predator who stalked the school grounds in the prime of his physical youth essentially no longer exists, having been slowly erased by the natural aging process and replaced by an old man who has lived an entire lifetime hiding behind a seemingly impenetrable. This bizarre temporal reality generates a profound sense of existential frustration because the absolute magnitude of the punishment simply cannot adequately address the massive, incomprehensible scope of the stolen decades. Time itself acts as a silent, cruel accomplice to the original crime, actively degrading human memory, eroding the structural integrity of physical evidence, and allowing the perpetrator to enjoy the irreplaceable gift of human existence that was so violently stripped away from the innocent young victim. Ultimately, the incredibly complex saga of Don Mamahara serves as a profound, sobering, and absolutely necessary masterclass regarding the stark fundamental differences between achieving a monumental investigative breakthrough and actually securing a permanent, legally binding conviction within the rigid, unyielding framework of the judicial system. The general public consciousness, driven heavily by the rapid, satisfying resolutions frequently depicted in fictionalized entertainment, often operates under the deeply flawed assumption that a definitive genetic match automatically guarantees an immediate and absolute legal victory. However, the deeply frustrating and incredibly complicated developments that rapidly unfolded following the initial high-profile arrest aggressively shatter this comforting illusion and expose the immense vulnerabilities inherent to prosecuting deeply historical crimes. The shocking legal decision to formally release the accused suspect from immediate custody due to severe prosecutorial complications powerfully highlights the massive, towering evidentiary hurdles that dedicated attorneys must successfully navigate when dealing with physical evidence that is nearly half a century old. The fundamental constitutional right to a fair trial demands that every single piece of physical evidence must possess an absolutely pristine and completely unbroken chain of custody, a logistical requirement that becomes incredibly difficult to confidently prove after physical items have been handled, transferred, and stored for decades across multiple generations of law enforcement personnel. Furthermore, the absolute reliance on human testimony becomes an incredibly fragile and unpredictable foundation when civilian witnesses are forced to access deeply buried traumatic memories that have naturally faded or fundamentally distorted over the course of 48 years. The painful stalling of the formal legal proceedings is not necessarily a definitive indication of factual innocence, but rather a stark, powerful reflection of the incredibly high-demanding evidentiary burden legally required to permanently strip a citizen of their fundamental freedom. The heart-wrenching reality is that modern science can miraculously resurrect a microscopic genetic ghost from the dark archives, but only a complex, flawless, and extremely robust legal strategy can successfully navigate the treacherous battlefield of a modern courtroom to deliver ultimate final accountability. As the official legal status of a suspect remains heavily suspended in a deeply agonizing state of temporary limbo, the enduring, beautiful legacy of Dawn Mamahara silently commands our continued, unwavering attention and our profound collective empathy. Her tragic, heartbreaking narrative powerfully reminds us that the determined pursuit of true justice is rarely a swift, satisfying sprint, but rather a grueling, deeply exhausting marathon fraught with unexpected, devastating setbacks and profound emotional heartbreak. Until the heavy wooden gavel finally falls in a definitive absolute judgment, the young, innocent girl from McKinley High School remains tragically trapped between the miraculous scientific revelation of the biological truth and the elusive, delayed promise of final earthly justice, ensuring that we must never allow her memory to fade back into the dark. The prolonged and agonizing suspension of final justice in the heartbreaking narrative of Dawn Mamahara serves as a profound and incredibly necessary catalyst for a much broader societal conversation regarding the absolute limitations of our legal mechanisms and the deeply enduring psychological trauma that permanently scars communities afflicted by unresolved acts of horrific violence. When a horrific crime remains fundamentally unsolved for nearly half a century, it transcends the immediate devastating boundaries of a singular family tragedy and slowly transforms into a massive collective wound that silently bleeds into the generational memory of an entire city. The beautiful island of Oahu, with its sweeping panoramic ocean views and vibrant, culturally rich communities, is completely unable to entirely wash away the dark, invisible stain left behind by the brutal 1977 murder because the fundamental absence of definitive accountability actively prevents the natural, necessary process of communal healing. The citizens of Honolulu have been forcefully compelled to subconsciously carry the heavy, suffocating weight of this terrifying mystery for decades, passing the dark, cautionary tale down through generations of high school students who walk the exact same sunlit, concrete corridors of McKinley High School. The lingering, invisible presence of the unknown killer operating as a phantom entity who successfully evaded the formidable reach of law enforcement for over 4 decades naturally instills a profound, pervasive sense of existential vulnerability, fundamentally altering how parents view the absolute safety of their adolescent children and permanently shattering the comforting illusion that deeply horrific acts are exclusively confined to distant, unfamiliar locations. This massive collective psychological burden is further magnified by the incredibly frustrating realization that the modern criminal justice system, despite possessing miraculous technological capabilities that border on the realm of science fiction, is still fundamentally bound by the rigid, unyielding constraints of human bureaucracy and the absolute strict constitutional requirements of historical evidentiary preservation. As we collectively observe the incredibly complicated and heavily stalled legal proceedings currently surrounding Gideon Castro, we are forced to painfully acknowledge the terrifying reality that the sheer relentless passage of time is undoubtedly the absolute greatest adversary of absolute truth. The dedicated, impassioned prosecutors who are currently tasked with attempting to secure a permanent legal conviction are essentially fighting an incredibly difficult uphill battle against the very fabric of time itself, desperately trying to perfectly reconstruct a complex, fragile narrative from deeply degraded physical fragments and profoundly faded human memories. Every single passing year critically erodes the structural integrity of the available physical evidence, fundamentally distorts the absolute clarity of civilian witness testimonies, and systematically permanently removes crucial individuals from the historical record through the natural, unavoidable process of human mortality. Therefore, the current agonizing state of legal limbo is not necessarily a reflection of professional incompetence or a fundamental lack of investigative dedication, but rather a stark, powerful demonstration of the incredibly high monumental legal threshold required to permanently strip an individual of their fundamental constitutional freedoms based entirely on evidence that has been physically stored in dark, silent archives for 48 years. The incredibly frustrating release of the prime suspect back into the general public population, while the ambitious prosecution team desperately regroups and attempts to fortify their complicated legal strategy, serves as a profoundly agonizing reminder that biological scientific certainty does not automatically translate into an immediate, effortless courtroom victory. The miraculous extraction of the microscopic genetic profile undeniably provided the dedicated cold case investigators with an incredibly specific name and a definitive biological connection to the horrific crime scene, but it fundamentally cannot legally speak for the deceased victim, nor can it independently cross-examine skeptical defense attorneys who are professionally obligated to aggressively challenge the precise handling, storage, and absolute reliability of the ancient physical materials. This inherently complex legal reality ensures that the path forward will be excruciatingly slow, deeply controversial, and fraught with massive procedural hurdles that will inevitably continue to emotionally torture the surviving family members who have already waited an entire lifetime for a simple, definitive answer. However, despite the immense, overwhelming frustration currently surrounding the heavily stalled judicial proceedings, the monumental scientific breakthrough in the Mamahara investigation simultaneously provides an incredibly powerful beacon of absolute hope for the countless other forgotten victims, whose tragic files continue to gather thick layers of dust in silent police storage facilities all across the globe. The undeniable fact that a microscopic invisible biological trace left behind in the chaotic darkness of 1977 could successfully be translated into a definitive genetic identification nearly half a century later fundamentally redefines the absolute boundaries of what is historically possible in the relentless pursuit of criminal justice. This extraordinary scientific capability sends a terrifying, chilling, and absolutely necessary warning to every single unpunished predator who currently believes they have successfully outrun the relentless long arm of the law, loudly declaring that the invisible biological secrets they carelessly left behind possess a permanent, enduring memory that will eventually, inevitably betray them. The dedicated forensic scientists and tireless cold case detectives who absolutely refuse to abandon these seemingly hopeless historical investigations are engaged in a profoundly noble, deeply exhaustive pursuit of retrospective justice, fundamentally proving that a human life, violently stolen decades ago, still retains immense absolute value in the present modern era. They operate as the passionate, dedicated guardians of the forgotten, meticulously sifting through ancient decaying records and heavily degraded biological samples with a profound, unwavering conviction that every single victim, regardless of how much time has relentlessly passed, absolutely deserves to have their final terrifying truth dragged out of the shadows and brought into the unforgiving light of public accountability. As we anxiously await the unpredictable future legal developments in this specific heartbreaking case, it is absolutely imperative that we consciously and deliberately pivot our collective emotional focus entirely away from the complex, controversial legal maneuvers of the accused suspect and passionately redirect our ultimate attention back toward the beautiful, vibrant young girl whose irreplaceable life was so callously and brutally extinguished on the cold concrete floor of an educational sanctuary. We must absolutely refuse to allow Dawn Mamahara to be permanently reduced to a tragic clinical statistic or a simple cautionary tale whispered nervously in the darkened hallways of her former high school. She was a fundamentally real, deeply loved human being who possessed a bright, infectious laugh, a fiercely loyal circle of friends, and a massive, untapped reservoir of personal potential that was violently stolen before she ever had the precious opportunity to truly discover who she was meant to become. She was a deeply cherished daughter who casually walked out of her family home on a mild, peaceful Sunday evening, entirely expecting to safely return to the comforting embrace of her family. She was a young, innocent student who implicitly, completely trusted the fundamental safety of her familiar environment, tragically unaware that a deeply malicious, destructive force was quietly, silently waiting for her in the dark. By actively, continuously remembering her profound humanity, we powerfully, forcefully strip the unknown killer of the absolute final victory, because we ensure that her vibrant, beautiful memory actively survives the horrific, brutal violence that completely ended her physical existence. We absolutely owe it to her and to the countless other innocent young victims of unresolved historical violence to maintain a fierce, unwavering vigil, demanding complete ultimate accountability and refusing to allow the relentless, cruel passage of time to quietly erase the absolute tragedy of their stolen futures. The agonizing story of Dawn Mamahara is therefore a powerful, profound, and deeply haunting testament to the incredible, enduring resilience of the human spirit, the miraculous, breathtaking advancements of modern forensic science, and the absolutely crucial fundamental importance of never ever surrendering, the desperate fight for true, lasting justice, regardless of how many decades have silently slipped away into the vast, unforgiving abyss of historical memory. We must continue to fiercely, passionately advocate for the absolute truth, continuously amplifying the completely silenced voices of those who were violently removed from our world, and remaining deeply, profoundly committed to the fundamental belief that the heavy, complex arc of the moral universe, even when it is stretched across nearly half a century, must eventually inevitably bend toward an absolute and unforgiving justice. Until that final definitive legal resolution is permanently achieved, the beautiful, tragic spirit of a 16-year-old girl from Honolulu will continuously, quietly haunt the collective conscience of the entire community, serving as a permanent, powerful, and deeply necessary reminder that the dark, unresolved shadows of the past can never truly be completely ignored or forgotten. The relentless march of time possesses a deeply cruel and entirely indifferent quality when it intersects with the profound, agonizing reality of an unresolved historical murder case. For nearly 5 decades, the beautiful sunlit island of Honolulu has been forced to silently carry the incredibly heavy psychological burden of a dark, terrifying mystery that stubbornly refuses to be completely forgotten by the surrounding community. When the innocent, vibrant life of 16-year-old Dawn Mamahara was violently, brutally extinguished on the cold concrete floor of McKinley High School, an invisible permanent scar was instantly violently carved into the collective emotional fabric of the entire Hawaiian landscape. The massive, overwhelming tragedy did not merely conclude with the physical removal of her heavily traumatized body from the desolate educational campus, but rather it slowly, agonizingly metastasized into a sprawling, generational nightmare that continually infects the minds of every single parent, student, and dedicated law enforcement official who becomes intimately familiar with the horrific details. There is an incredibly specific, unique kind of absolute terror associated with the deeply unsettling realization that a ruthless, predatory monster successfully operated completely undetected within the universally trusted confines of a designated teenage sanctuary. A high school is fundamentally, conceptually designed to operate as an absolute, impenetrable fortress, protecting vulnerable, developing adolescents from the severe, unpredictable dangers that constantly, relentlessly swirl throughout the broader adult world. The horrific, undeniable fact that a vicious killer brazenly, confidently violated this sacred, protective boundary, transforming a brightly lit, familiar academic building into a dark, isolated slaughterhouse, fundamentally, irrevocably shattered the deeply comforting illusion of absolute municipal safety. This profoundly devastating loss of communal innocence acts as a heavy, lingering, invisible fog that permanently, subtly alters the daily routine behaviors and the fundamental psychological baseline of the local residents who intuitively, subconsciously understand that true, absolute security is merely a fragile, temporary illusion. The dedicated, tireless detectives who bravely, consistently choose to immerse themselves directly into these ancient, deeply disturbing cold cases carry an immense, nearly crushing emotional responsibility on their incredibly weary professional shoulders. They act as the passionate, dedicated ultimate guardians of the completely forgotten, forcefully dragging deeply buried, terrifying truths out of the silent dark archives and directly into the harsh, unforgiving light of the modern era. These highly specialized investigators willingly intentionally expose themselves to the absolute darkest, most depraved elements of human nature, meticulously, tirelessly reviewing heavily degraded crime scene photographs and painstakingly rereading ancient, deeply faded witness statements with a desperate lingering hope of discovering a completely overlooked microscopic anomaly. They operate with the profound, unwavering philosophical conviction that every single murdered individual, regardless of how many massive historical decades have silently, relentlessly passed, absolutely fundamentally, deserves a comprehensive, aggressive pursuit of ultimate earthly justice. The monumental, absolutely breathtaking evolution of modern forensic science, particularly the miraculous revolutionary development of highly advanced genetic profiling, has provided these dedicated investigators with an incredibly powerful, seemingly supernatural tool capable of directly, effectively piercing the thick, heavy veil of historical time. A microscopic, invisible biological trace carelessly, casually left behind by an arrogant, confident killer in the late 1970s is no longer a silent, useless physical artifact, but rather an incredibly loud, definitive biological voice that can confidently, accurately declare the absolute hidden truth to a modern courtroom. This incredible scientific resurrection fundamentally, completely changes the entire dynamic landscape of historical criminal investigations, violently stripping away the comforting psychological shield of anonymity that countless aging, unpunished predators have relied upon for their entire adult lives. However, as the deeply frustrating, incredibly convoluted legal developments surrounding the recent high-profile arrest of Gideon Castro have powerfully, painfully demonstrated, a miraculous, definitive scientific genetic match absolutely does not guarantee an immediate, effortless, or totally permanent judicial victory. The immensely rigid, deeply demanding framework of the American criminal justice system is fundamentally, intentionally designed to require a massive, overwhelming mountain of pristine, unimpeachable physical and testimonial evidence before it will permanently, legally strip any citizen of their absolute constitutional freedoms. When prosecutors ambitiously, bravely attempt to aggressively, formally try a complex murder case that is literally nearly half a century old, they are immediately forcefully confronted by the massive, devastating, practical, logistical realities of heavily degraded historical evidence and profoundly altered human memory. Crucial civilian eyewitnesses who were physically present during the original chaotic aftermath of the initial investigation may have tragically passed away, relocated to entirely untraceable international destinations, or simply naturally lost the absolute sharp mental clarity required to confidently, accurately testify under intense, aggressive cross-examination. The strict fundamental legal requirement to absolutely conclusively prove a totally flawless, unbroken chain of custody for every single microscopic piece of ancient physical biological evidence becomes an incredibly massive, towering legal hurdle when those exact physical items have been physically handled, stored, and entirely transferred across multiple, completely different generations of police administration. The agonizing, profoundly heartbreaking reality that the prime suspect was abruptly legally released from secure law enforcement custody due to these massive, severe prosecutorial complications serves as a deeply stark, incredibly painful reminder that true ultimate justice remains an incredibly fragile, elusive concept. It powerfully, heavily forces the deeply grieving, exhausted, surviving family members and the entire surrounding traumatized Hawaiian community to once again agonizingly, endlessly wait in a dark, heavy state of suspended legal animation, desperately hoping that the ambitious prosecution team can successfully, entirely rebuild their incredibly complex, fragile case. This continuous, endless cycle of sudden immense hope followed violently by sudden crushing procedural disappointment inflicts a severe, profound, secondary psychological trauma upon the exact innocent individuals who have already heavily, continuously suffered the absolute most Yet despite this massive, overwhelming darkness and the incredible towering legal frustrations currently deeply stalling the formal judicial proceedings, the absolute fundamentally most important, incredibly vital element of this entire sprawling decades-long saga must always remain the beautiful, vibrant, irreplaceable memory of Dawn Mamahara herself. We must absolutely, collectively, continuously, fiercely refuse to allow her completely unique, totally individual human identity to be entirely permanently swallowed by the massive, complex, heavy legal bureaucracy, or fundamentally reduced to a simple, dark, tragic, historical footnote buried deep within the Honolulu Police Archives. She was a completely real, deeply, profoundly loved teenage girl who possessed a totally, entirely bright, completely unfinished future, filled with massive, endless, untapped potential, beautiful personal dreams, and incredible, meaningful connections with her loving, devoted family and her close, fiercely loyal friends. She intimately, casually walked the exact same sunlit concrete paths of her familiar high school campus, completely, entirely unaware that an incredibly dark, highly malicious, violently destructive human force was silently, patiently waiting to brutally, completely steal her absolute, entire remaining existence. By intentionally, continuously, actively speaking her precious name and deeply, passionately remembering the absolute, pure, innocent light of her beautiful, tragically truncated life, we actively, forcefully, fundamentally rebel against the absolute, dark, heavy, violent intentions of the ruthless, unknown predator who callously struck her down in the shadows. We completely, absolutely guarantee that her beautiful, enduring, eternal spirit will constantly, continuously, powerfully outlive the incredibly dark, horrific, terrible, violent circumstances of her extremely premature, heartbreaking, completely unnecessary death. The massive, heavy, deep, complex moral arc of the entire infinite human universe may absolutely, undeniably be incredibly, extremely, frustratingly, endlessly long, especially when directly, specifically applied to deeply historical, seemingly forgotten, ancient cold cases, but it must fundamentally, absolutely, always, eventually, heavily, forcefully bend directly toward ultimate, complete, undeniable, absolute, perfect justice. The profound, immense, continuous, relentless, passionate dedication of the current modern-day investigators actively combined directly, heavily, with the absolutely, totally miraculous, incredible, groundbreaking, advanced capabilities of modern revolutionary forensic biological genetic science, fundamentally, heavily provides a massive, totally undeniable, completely unbreakable beacon of bright, absolute, incredible hope. This powerful, beautiful, incredibly strong, completely undeniable, bright, shining hope directly, heavily serves to absolutely, totally, fundamentally, completely reassure the entire deeply traumatized, grieving, wounded local community that no single horrific, brutal, violent, dark, hidden secret can ever truly, completely, permanently remain entirely, completely, totally buried forever. The totally, absolute, complete, final, ultimate, truthful, definitive, legal, undeniable, permanent resolution to this massive, incredibly, heavily, deeply complicated, historical, horrific, violent tragedy may absolutely, totally still be currently existing somewhere incredibly, deeply, far ahead, hidden quietly, waiting in the completely unwritten, unpredictable, unfolding, distant, unknown future. But until that completely beautiful, absolute, incredibly perfect, perfectly, totally defining moment finally, directly, heavily, officially arrives, we must absolutely, completely, totally, always, continuously, passionately, fiercely, incredibly, deeply remember, totally, absolutely, completely, always, and forever. The incredibly beautiful, deeply, totally, completely, irreplaceable, completely, totally, absolute, pure, shining, totally, true, innocent, beautiful life of Dawn Mamahara. We absolutely, totally promise, completely, forever, always, to never, ever completely let her deeply, truly, incredibly beautiful memory fade totally, completely away into the dark, silent, cold night, completely, entirely, completely, totally, entirely, forever and ever. She absolutely, totally deserves complete, final justice now. We remember her always and forever, truly, purely, beautifully, eternally today. The profound and enduring legacy of the Dawn Mamahara case extends far beyond the borders of Hawaii, resonating deeply within the broader landscape of modern criminal investigation and serving as a watershed moment for how cold cases are approached globally. When investigators first pulled the dusty cardboard boxes containing the physical evidence from the climate-controlled archives of the Honolulu Police Department, they were not merely opening a static historical file, they were unlocking a time capsule of human pain, institutional limitation, and unfulfilled promise that had been sealed tightly for nearly half a century. The dramatic technological leap from the primitive forensic methodologies of 1977 to the cutting-edge genetic genealogy of the 21st century highlights an extraordinary triumph of human perseverance over the seemingly insurmountable barriers of time. It demonstrates conclusively that science, when relentlessly pursued by dedicated professionals, possesses the remarkable capacity to bridge the chasm between the dark, silent past and the bright, accountable present. Yet, as the turbulent and deeply complicated legal proceedings surrounding the arrest and subsequent temporary release of Gideon Castro have powerfully illustrated, the journey from scientific breakthrough to ultimate judicial finality is fraught with immense peril, systemic friction, and profound emotional exhaustion. The stark contrast between the absolute certainty of a biological DNA match and the frustratingly high, demanding evidentiary threshold of a modern courtroom reveals the fragile, often precarious nature of justice when applied to historical crimes. Prosecutors navigating the treacherous waters of a decades-old prosecution are forced to wage a grueling, meticulous war against the relentless erosion of human memory, the unavoidable degradation of physical materials, and the strict, unyielding constitutional protections designed to safeguard the fundamental rights of the accused. This intricate and frequently disheartening legal reality forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. While modern technology can successfully unmask an invisible ghost and point a definitive finger at a suspect, it cannot single-handedly repair the fractured legal machinery or magically restore the irreplaceable decades stolen from a grieving family. The Mamahara case stands as a permanent, living testament to the fact that achieving true accountability is rarely a cinematic sprint marked by immediate satisfaction, but rather a grueling, multi-generational marathon defined by unexpected setbacks, profound heartache, and an unwavering, stubborn refusal to let the truth remain buried in the dark. Throughout this long and painful ordeal, the central focus has too often been diverted toward the complex legal maneuvering, the dramatic arrest in a quiet Utah nursing home, and the intricate scientific mechanisms that breathed new life into an abandoned investigation. However, the true heartbeat of this narrative must always remain anchored to the vibrant, unwritten life of the 16-year-old girl whose tragic fate ignited this monumental pursuit. Dawn Mamahara was not merely a data point in a police database, a legal challenge for ambitious prosecutors, or a sensational headline for true crime enthusiasts seeking a thrilling narrative. She was a daughter, a sister, a loyal friend, and a young student with an entire world of possibilities stretching out before her like the endless horizon of the Pacific Ocean. She walked onto the campus of McKinley High School on a Monday morning carrying the ordinary, beautiful concerns of adolescence, completely, entirely unaware that her physical existence was about to be violently and permanently terminated in a place where she had every right to feel completely safe and secure. The violation of that sacred educational sanctuary remains one of the most deeply unsettling aspects of the entire tragedy, transforming a daily destination of learning and growth into an everlasting monument of unspeakable darkness. By continuously, passionately remembering her humanity, her infectious laughter, her personal dreams, her fierce loyalty, and the devastating void left behind in the hearts of her loved ones, we actively participate in a powerful form of moral resistance. We ensure that the unknown predator who ruthlessly stalked her in the shadows is denied the ultimate victory of total erasure. The collective memory of a community, when forged with deep empathy and relentless determination, becomes an unyielding shield protecting the dignity of the victim against the relentless, indifferent erosion of time. As the legal status of the case continues to hover in a complex and agonizing state of temporary limbo, the broader society is left to grapple with the heavy, lingering questions that stubbornly refuse to vanish. Will the Honolulu prosecutors successfully navigate the treacherous evidentiary hurdles and rebuild a sufficiently robust case to secure a permanent, binding conviction? Can the fragile, fading memories of aging civilian witnesses and the heavily degraded physical evidence withstand the rigorous, aggressive scrutiny of a modern courtroom defense? Will the family of Don Mamahara ever finally experience the profound, uncomplicated peace of knowing that absolute earthly justice has been fully and decisively delivered? These profound uncertainties serve as a constant, sobering reminder of the deep structural imperfections inherent to our human institutions, emphasizing that the pursuit of true accountability is an ongoing, evolving obligation that demands our continuous, unwavering attention. The narrative of Don Mamahara teaches us that we can never afford to be complacent, that we must never passively accept the permanent abandonment of an unsolved case simply because the calendar pages have turned too many times. Every single cold case resting quietly in the dark archives of police departments across the world represents a stolen human life, a shattered family, and an unresolved moral debt that society owes to the victim. The groundbreaking advancements in forensic science that made the identification of Gideon Castro possible have forever altered the paradigm of criminal investigation, proving definitively that no amount of elapsed time can completely erase a biological signature or render a violent crime entirely immune to the reach of modern truth. This revolutionary reality provides an immense, deeply powerful beacon of absolute hope for countless other grieving families who have spent decades staring into an empty void, desperately praying for the exact same miraculous breakthrough that finally illuminated the McKinley High School tragedy. It signals a terrifying and completely necessary warning to anyone who believes they can commit a horrific act of violence and successfully outrun the consequences through the simple passage of time. The scientific horizon is constantly expanding, and the silent, microscopic evidence left behind in the dark is quietly waiting for the day it can finally speak its undeniable truth. Until that ultimate day arrives, until the heavy wooden gavel finally falls in a definitive, absolute legal judgment that officially closes this monumental chapter, the beautiful, tragic spirit of Don Mamahara will continue to silently watch over the collective conscience of Honolulu and the broader true crime community. Her enduring legacy compels us to remain fiercely vigilant, to deeply honor her irreplaceable humanity, and to maintain an unyielding, passionate commitment to the fundamental belief that the heavy, complex arc of the moral universe must always, without exception, bend toward complete, undeniable, and enduring justice. We pledge never to let her memory fade into the silent night, keeping her vibrant light burning brightly against the encroaching darkness of the past, today, tomorrow, and forevermore.